Quijada, and this is my persuasive speech. We must rethink how worship shapes women. Can you imagine that the very frameworks of worship, its language, symbols, and rituals, how quietly shape how women understand sacrifice and strength? To rethink worship, it is like to interrogate how theological practices, constructions, gender expectation of devotion and endurance. Recognizing the connection between worship and way women carry invites broader invitation of how cultural institution, religion, and otherwise forms of understanding worth and duty. Can you imagine that the very framework of worship, its language, symbols, and rituals, have quietly shaped how we as women understand sacrifice and strength? Living in a digital age where social media constantly define beauty and worth, we often find ourselves comparing our bodies and questioning our value. We must rethink how worship shapes women. First, I will explain how worship practice shapes the expectation and emotional labor imposed on women. And second, I will explore how these practices interact with social pressure to influence women's sense of worth and identity. Then I will talk about these combined religions, cultural, and social pressures not only shaping women's role, but also profoundly affecting their self-worth, identity, and overall well-being. For example, many worship traditions encourage women to prioritize service, caregiving, and supporting roles within the congregation, framing this responsibility as a spiritual obligation. These expectations parallel society pressures on women to meet idealized standards of beauty and worth. Only 2% of women in the global sample consider themselves beautiful. By lacking this spiritual and social pressure, we can see how women are often burdened with both visible and invisible labors that shapes their sense of value and self-perception. Worship practices often praise self-sacrifice and constant giving, making it feel wrong for women to prioritize themselves. According to Elizabeth Bernstein, the Wall Street Journal 2025 illustrates this influence. A recent arena released with 6,700 women, she called her audience to uphold ideals of marriage, motherhood, and cautions against empathy, reinforcing pressures that link women's value selfness, showing how religions and cultural messages together shapes women's identities and self-worth. Now that I have talked about worship practices that shapes expectations and emotional labors imposed on women, I will talk about how these practices intercept with social pressures to influence women's sense of worth and identity. Religious expectation of devotion and selfness combined with social pressures around appearance and caregiving, shaping women's self-worth and identity. Worship practices intersect with social pressures as expectation of devotion and selfness in religions combined with cultural demands around appearance. In this campaign published by ABC News in 2015, it started as "Are You Beach Body Ready Yet?", which reinforced harmful stereotypes about women's bodies, together shaping women's sense of worth and identity. Beyond social and religious expectations, women face pressures to suppress their own needs in favor of traditional roles. According to the Nate Caton Los Angeles Times 2025, showing how women often disappear in the men's world, showing how deeply cultural and familial pressure can erase women's voice and identity. Now that I explain how worship practices and social pressure shapes in expectation and roles imposed on women, I will explain how these combined pressures influence women's sense of worth and identity. These combined religious, cultural, and social pressures not only shape women's roles, but also profoundly affect their self-worth, identity, and overall well-being. Women internalize the expectation imposed by religion and society, which can lead to feeling guilt, inequity, and diminished self-esteem when they cannot meet these ideals. Gabriela Lascano, TED Talk 2024, argues that it's possible to love our body and simultaneously want to change it for health and personal worth. Her story shows that self-love and desire for change aren't mutually exclusive. Rather, the pressure comes when women feels they must choose one or other instead of being allowed both. Beyond internationalized expectations, women are after vulnerable to various forms of violence, physical, emotional, and systemic that underneath their sense of safety and self-worth. Upholding women's right to live free from violence is essential as reinforce her identity and autonomy. According to Heather Barr, WHRW.org 2025, approximately 1 to 3 women globally experience physical or sexual violence in her lifetime, highlighting these persuasive socials pursues the rest of women face. Now that I've given you a better understanding of worship practices and shapes on expectation and emotional labor imposed on women, I will finish this speech. First, I talk about how worship practices shapes the expectation and emotional labor imposed on women, and second, I explain how these practices intersect with social pressures to influence women's sense of worth and identity. Then I talk about these combined religious, cultural, and social pressures. When women should never have to carry the weight of invisible expectations or fear their safety in the name of devotion. True faith honors their worth, lifts their voices, and lets them live free, whole, and unapologetic themselves. Thank you.